I walked in on my husband and my son's fiancée. I was stunned when I learned who she truly was. I caught my husband in our living room with my son's fiancée just hours before the wedding. I was ready to burst in and tear everything apart, but movement on the upstairs landing stopped me. My son, Elijah, was standing there in the shadows. His face looked carved from stone. He met my eyes and whispered, "Mom, I already know. And it's worse than you think." Hello everyone. Thanks for being here with me today. Before I dive into what happened, I'd love to know what city you're watching from. Drop it in the comments. Now, let me take you into that day. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. On the morning of my son's wedding, I was awake at 5. Sleep just wouldn't come. I blamed it on nerves. What mother doesn't feel tense when her only son is getting married? I sat in my home office, the glow of my laptop in front of me, spreadsheets open, numbers blurring into meaningless columns. I run a small CPA practice from home. It's not glamorous, but it got Elijah through college and covered the gaps that my husband Franklin's salary didn't quite reach. Outside, the sky was still dark, the world quiet. In my mind, though, the day was already in full motion. I saw our backyard in my imagination. Rows of white chairs lined up on the lawn, the arch Franklin built standing tall on the patio, wrapped in the rose bushes I'd been nurturing for months. I checked the string lights over the patio more times than I care to admit, making sure no bulb dared to die on my son's big day. This was supposed to be perfect. Elijah deserved nothing less. I had poured 25 years into my marriage, 23 into raising Elijah. I'd been the calendar, the reminder, the one who paid the bills, scheduled the dentist appointments, handled the little disasters no one else noticed. Franklin had always been the charming one, the storyteller, the extrovert everyone gravitated toward. I was the one he leaned on, the steady one. For most of our marriage, that felt like enough. But lately, something has shifted. A quiet distance had slipped between us like a draft under a door. He paused conversations when I walked into rooms. His phone stayed tilted away from me, screen down on the table. When I asked what was going on, he laughed it off. "Just work, honey. They're talking about promotion again." I chose to take him at his word. You don't throw away a quarter-century of history over a feeling you can't fully explain. The office door clicked open, pulling me out of my thoughts. Elijah stepped in, still in pajamas, a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes. He has my practical nature but his father's looks, which made what came next even more painful. "Mom, you've been up forever," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "The wedding's not until 4. "I just want everything perfect for my boy," I replied, shutting my laptop and forcing a smile. "Dad's not in bed," he said, coming closer and sitting on the edge of my desk. "He left early. Said he needed to pick up a gift for Madison's parents." I frowned. That was news to me. "He said something about making a good impression on the Ellingtons," Elijah added, his tone odd, like he was weighing every word. He stared into his coffee for a moment, then looked up. "Mom, can I ask you something?" I turned my chair so I was facing him fully. In the harsh light of my desk lamp, he looked younger and older at the same time. My baby boy and a grown man trapped in the same body. "What's on your mind?" I asked. He hesitated, then exhaled slowly. "Do you think Madison really loves me?" It felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Madison, beautiful, polished, ambitious, was a young architect from an influential family. On paper, she was everything any parent would want for their son. But I'd seen the small things. The way her eyes slid past him when he talked about his passions. The way her fingers lived on her phone during family dinners. The way her smile sharpened when conversations turned to careers, status, and money. "Why would you ask that today of all days?" I said gently. "It's natural to be nervous." "Maybe it is," he murmured. "But sometimes when she looks at me, I feel like I'm part of a checklist. Degree, career, nice family, design elements in her perfect life. And lately she's been spending a lot of time with Dad. She says he's helping her with finances and investments. Call him her mentor. His eyes flicked to mine, and in that moment, I realized he had noticed more than I wanted to admit. I remembered how Franklin seemed to light up when Madison arrived. How he always happened to be near her, helping her with her coat or refilling her drink. How he knew exactly how she liked her coffee without asking. I wanted to tell Elijah every suspicion in my chest, but the words stuck. Instead, I squeezed his hand. Cold feet are normal. Marriage is a big step. It's more than that, he said, his voice cracking. He finally met my gaze, and the pain there made my heart ache. I think she's in love with someone else. I felt the blood drain from my face. What makes you think that? Little things, he whispered. She lights up when Dad calls. She asks about him first when she comes over. Yesterday I saw them in the garden. The way he looked at her, it wasn't a future father-in-law looking at his future daughter-in-law. A hot flush rose up my neck. Elijah, that's a serious accusation. I know, he said, staring at the floor. And I pray I'm wrong. Before I could answer, the door opened again. Franklin walked in, already dressed in a pressed shirt and slacks, looking like he'd stepped out of an advertisement. His smile was wide, a little too bright. Well, look at my two favorite people, he announced. Big day, son. You should get some rest. Simone, you're going to burn yourself out. He mentioned that Madison would be stopping by around 10 to go over last-minute seating details. He brushed off Elijah's questions with some nonsense about politics and not seating the wrong relatives together. Elijah's jaw tightened. My stomach knotted. The room felt crowded with things unsaid. After they left, I was supposed to call the caterer at 10:30, a call I'd scheduled weeks ago. Instead, I picked up the phone and told them I had a family emergency. I cleared my morning. I didn't know what I was going to discover, but for the first time in 25 years, I was done pretending not to notice what was right in front of me. I spent the next couple of hours moving around the house like an actress stuck in the wrong play. I wiped counters that were already clean. I rearranged flowers that didn't need rearranging. Every sound made me jump. Every car slowing near the house made my heart race. I plastered on the smile of a glowing mother of the groom while inside it felt like my ribs were being pried apart. Exactly at 10, Madison's white BMW rolled into the driveway. She stepped out like she was arriving at a fashion shoot. Perfect hair, effortless grace, casual clothes that looked anything but cheap. She walked up to the front door like she belonged there. Instead of greeting her, I slipped out the back. I crouched behind the big hydrangea bushes by our living room windows, feeling absurd and desperate all at once. Who hides in their own yard? A woman who's out of options, that's who. Through the large bay window, I watched Franklin open the door and let her in. They stood by the fireplace where we always took our Christmas photos. He poured her a drink. I couldn't hear the words, but their bodies spoke clearly. They stood too close. His hand settled at the small of her back and stayed there, comfortable, familiar. My hands curled into fists. This was our home, our memories, our life. And there he was, touching my son's fiancée like she was his. When they leaned into each other, I rose, ready to storm in, flip tables, and let the whole day burn. But in the reflection of the glass, something on the upstairs landing caught my eye. Elijah, half hidden in shadows, watching them too. And just like that, my anger turned into something colder, sharper. This wasn't just my pain. It was my son's. Inside, Madison tilted her face up to Franklin. His hands went into her hair. Their kiss wasn't hesitant or accidental. It was deep, practiced, passionate, the kind of kiss people work up to, not stumble into. A roar filled my ears. I took a step toward the back door, ready to tear the whole house apart, when fingers closed around my arm. I spun around, heart in my throat. It was Elijah. He must have slipped downstairs and come out behind me. His face was pale, his eyes blazing with a fury I'd never seen in him. "Mom, don't," he whispered. "Not yet. Elijah, this is..." The words refused to form. Betrayal felt too small for what I was seeing. "I know what it is," he said. His voice shook, but his jaw was set. "Mom, I've known for weeks." The word weeks lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. I stared at my son, the kid I had watched grow from a toddler clutching toy cars to a man in a suit about to get married. He wasn't a boy anymore. The grief in his eyes was old, heavy, and it scared me. We stayed crouched behind those pretty blue hydrangeas, the ones I'd been so proud of for the wedding. They had become cover for a scene I would never forget. Inside, my husband and my son's bride-to-be slid from the fireplace to the sofa like they had done it 100 times. I turned away. I couldn't watch another second of it. "I tried to brush it off," Elijah said, voice low, eyes fixed on the grass. "I told myself I was imagining things. Dad's just being nice. Madison's just stressed. I didn't want to believe what I was seeing." He swallowed hard. "Then I saw them having lunch together a month ago. Dad told me it was a business meeting. Madison told me she'd spent the afternoon shopping with her girlfriends. Their stories didn't line up. That's when I knew something was wrong. I felt sick. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "You shouldn't have gone through this alone." He pulled out his phone and unlocked it with shaking fingers. "Because I needed proof. And because..." He looked at me, eyes older than 23 should ever be. "I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves." He handed me the phone. I swiped the screen, and my heart plummeted. The first photo showed Franklin and Madison walking into the St. Regis downtown, time-stamped on a weekday afternoon when he'd supposedly been at a conference. The next photo showed them leaving 2 hours later, rumpled and intimate. There were more: restaurants, parking lots, little stolen pockets of time scattered all over the city. "You hired someone?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "A private investigator. Elijah, the money." "Don't worry about that," he said sharply. "It was worth every cent." I scrolled through image after image, each one another blow. The affair wasn't a lapse in judgment. It was a whole second life. I pushed myself up, rage roaring back. "We're stopping this right now," I said. "I'm going in there." "No." Elijah's tone cut through my anger like a blade. He pulled me back down behind the bushes. "Mom, you have to trust me. I have a plan." "A plan?" I hissed. "Elijah, this is insane. She's about to marry you. He's my husband. We can't just..." "Think about it," he said urgently. "If we storm now, what happens? Dad will spin it. He'll say you're overreacting. Madison will cry. They'll swear it was the first and only time. They'll twist it until we're the crazy ones. You know he can do that." I hated that he was right. Franklin could talk his way out of anything. He'd make it sound like a misunderstanding. Madison would cling to Elijah and sob about pressure and nerves. And somewhere in the middle of all that chaos, the truth would get buried. "So what do you want to do instead?" I asked, my anger cooling into something deadlier. Elijah's mouth curved into a grim, unfamiliar smile. "We don't just stop it," he said. "We expose it. Publicly. Completely. No escape routes. No private excuses. We end them, Mom. For good." His ruthlessness startled me. But then I looked at the living room again, at the silhouettes on our sofa, and I knew I was done being the understanding wife. The woman who endlessly smoothed things over had died behind those flowers. "Tell me the plan," I said. That evening, Franklin came home as if nothing had happened. He kissed my cheek. He asked about catering, about guests, about the playlist. He talked about the speech he'd give as father of the groom, his eyes bright with pride. If I hadn't seen what I'd seen, I might have believed him. Maybe I had been believing versions of this for years. I played along. I nodded, smiled, and answered his questions. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left my skin running on autopilot. When he finally went to bed, Elijah and I met in my office. I locked the door and pulled the blinds shut. The room, usually my quiet workspace, felt like a command center. On my desk lay printed photos, notes, and timestamps, a rough sketch of a case that would make any prosecutor grin. "Tell me about the investigator," I said, tracing a finger over the first image of Franklin and Madison at the hotel. Elijah shifted in his chair. "Her name's Aisha Whitfield," he said. "She's Auntie Aisha." For a split second, I thought I'd misheard him. "My sister." He nodded quickly. I didn't know who else to go to. I knew she'd keep it quiet. And I knew she never liked Dad much. A short, humorless laugh escaped me. Little sister Aisha. 20 years on the force, retired as a cop and now a private investigator. I had been too ashamed to tell her how bad things had gotten between Franklin and me, but of course she had been pulled into the rubble anyway. "I'll call her," I said. When Aisha answered, her voice was sleepy but alert. "Simone. It's past midnight. What's wrong?" "Everything," I said. And then it all came out. The suspicions, the photos, the scene in the living room. I cried into the phone the way I hadn't let myself cry in front of Elijah. She listened quietly. When I finished, there was no shocked gasp on the other end, just a long exhale. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," she said. "I've seen the way he watches that girl. I was hoping I was reading it wrong." "Elijah told me about the pictures," I said, wiping my face. "What else do you have?" "More than you want," she replied, her tone slipping into professional mode. "I've been tailing them for 3 weeks. They meet like clockwork. Same hotel, same pattern. And while I was at it, I started digging into something else." "What?" "His money," she said. "I wanted to know where he was getting all this cash. He's not as careful as he thinks he is." My stomach clenched. "What did you find?" "That's not a phone conversation," she said. "Meet me in the morning. We'll go over everything." "And Simone." "Yes. You need to be ready," she said softly. "This goes deeper than you think." The next morning, I met Aisha in my parked car, away from the house, away from neighbors, away from the noise of wedding preparations. She lugged in a laptop and a thick envelope that made my breath hitch. She opened the laptop first. Rows of numbers filled the spreadsheet on the screen. "I pulled statements from your joint accounts and your retirement funds," she explained. "He's been doing small cash withdrawals for years. Always just under the amount that triggers questions. Different branches. Different times. It looks random at first." "I thought it was for his hobby," I said weakly. "He told me he needed cash to buy rare coins." Aisha snorted. "His hobby is to wear designer heels," she said. "The cash paid for hotel rooms, luxury dinners, and gifts. But that's not the worst." She clicked to another tab. "He also took out loans against your pension plan," she said. "About $60,000 in the last year and a half." I stared at the screen. That can't be right. He would have needed my signature. "He forged it," she said matter-of-factly. "I compared the loan documents to your tax returns. It's a good forgery, but it's not you." I pressed my fist to my mouth. This was beyond cheating. Franklin hadn't just lied to me. He'd been methodically stripping away our financial future. "And then there's this," Aisha added, sliding the envelope into my lap. "It came back first thing this morning." My hands trembled as I opened it. Scientific terms swam in front of my eyes until one line snapped into focus. Probability of paternity 99.999%. I felt the world tilt. "She's 15, Aisha said quietly. "Her name is Zoe. Her mother is Nicole Jenkins. They used to work at the same firm years ago. Nicole left suddenly. A few months later, the payments started. Same woman. Same kid. 15 years of hush money. I closed my eyes, picturing the last 15 years of my life. Family holidays, anniversaries, soccer games. While I'd been building what I thought was a solid, honest home, he'd been funding a second life a short drive away. Where do they live? I asked, my voice flat. About 20 minutes from you, she answered. Nice house. Nice neighborhood. No obvious big income. You can connect the dots. I thought about that girl, Zoe. Just a child caught in a web she didn't create. Anger, grief, disbelief, all of it crashed together inside me. Put it with the rest, I said, handing the report back to Aisha. My tears were gone. Their place was calm, so cold it scared me. If he wants a double life, he's about to lose both. The knowledge of Franklin's secret daughter sat in my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. But Aisha wasn't finished. Now, she said, flipping to another file, let's talk about Madison. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel. What about her? She isn't just sleeping with your husband, Aisha said. She's stealing from her law firm. It took me a minute to process that. Stealing. Aisha turned the laptop so I could see. She's a junior partner at a big firm downtown. She's been padding expense reports and creating fake invoices for made-up consultants. The money flows into a shell company with her mother's maiden name on it. From there, it ends up in her personal accounts. The numbers on the screen made my head spin. How much? Over 200,000 in the last year. I stared at the total, stunned. And you can prove it's her? I've got internal documents, transfers, and a friend in economic crimes who confirmed the pattern, she replied. The theft is real. And it's traceable. To her. So my husband is draining our retirement to spoil his mistress, and she's looting her firm to spoil him, I said, voice shaking. They're feeding each other with stolen money. It gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it, Aisha said. Some of the cash Franklin took from your pension never went to hotels or jewelry. He invested it in a real estate opportunity Madison found. Let me guess, I muttered. The deal collapsed. It never existed, Aisha said bluntly. The money went straight into one of her private accounts. She wasn't just using him. She was conning him too. For a brief, bitter moment, I almost laughed. The man who always thought he was the smartest person in any room had been duped by a woman half his age, while he was trying to betray me and his own son. It was twisted and, in a very ugly way, poetic. We spent another hour going through everything: hotel receipts, surveillance photos, bank records, forged signatures, shell companies, DNA results. The pile of evidence between us was the obituary of my marriage and the blueprint for the end of theirs. At some point, exhaustion hit me like a wave. Can we really do this? I whispered. Can we stand in front of hundreds of people and blow our lives up like this? Aisha's expression softened, but her voice stayed firm. Simone, if you try to fix this in private, they'll deny everything. They'll gaslight you. They'll make you doubt what you saw with your own eyes. And Elijah. They'll twist him up too. You know the pattern. You've lived with it. I did know. I'd spent years letting Franklin talk me out of my instincts. This way, she continued, the truth is out where everyone can see it. No way to bury it. No way to spin it. Madison faces actual criminal charges. Franklin faces legal consequences for what he did with your money. This isn't just revenge. It's accountability. I thought about Elijah's face behind those hydrangeas. I thought about Zoe, growing up a secret. I thought about the years I had devoted to a man who was never who I believed. You're right, I said at last. No more shadows. No more secrets. We do it. From that moment on, everything became a strategy. I had already met with a lawyer quietly, a week earlier when my suspicions about Franklin first solidified into something heavier. We'd drawn up divorce papers and had them notarized. I hadn't told Elijah. I hadn't told anyone. Now those papers felt less like a backup plan and more like a lifeline. I put copies of every key document onto a flash drive: bank records, photos, the DNA summary, Madison's embezzlement trail. I slipped that flash drive and the signed divorce packet into my clutch. They felt heavier than any makeup or keys could. Aisha handled the technical side. We had rented a large projection screen for a sentimental slideshow of Elijah's childhood photos. At least that's what everyone thought. Aisha disguised herself as part of the catering staff and hooked her laptop to the projector early, long before guests arrived. The real slideshow might have been sweet, but it was never going to see the light of day. She handed me a small remote. "One button," she said. "When you're ready, you press it." "What about the police?" I asked. She gave me a look that told me she was 10 steps ahead. "I've already talked to a detective in economic crimes. When they saw Madison's file, they didn't hesitate. They'll be there. Not in uniforms at first. But they'll be ready to move the second I give the signal." "And Franklin?" I asked. "What he did with your retirement money will come back to haunt him in civil court," Aisha said. "We'll help your lawyer shred him. For now, let's just say his reputation won't survive this." The hours before the ceremony passed in a blur. I put on my dress. I smiled for photos. I hugged relatives and thanked them for coming. Franklin told me I looked beautiful, and I thanked him politely while my mind replayed images of him kissing Madison in my living room. Every time Elijah and I caught each other's eyes, we shared the same unspoken thought: almost there. The guests arrived in waves. The garden filled with chatter and perfume, the clink of glassware, the rustle of silk and linen. The arch I'd decorated with my roses stood proudly on the patio. The string lights twined above, ready to glow when the sun dipped. At 4:05, I sat down in the front row. Franklin took the seat beside me and gave my hand a gentle squeeze, like we were teammates sharing a quiet moment. I looked at our intertwined hands and felt nothing. The well of love and trust one had drawn from for years was dry. The music changed. The wedding party began to walk down the aisle. Elijah stood at the altar, handsome and composed, the picture of a groom about to start a new life. But I could see the tightness in his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. Then Madison appeared. She looked like every bridal magazine cover ever printed. Delicate lace, flowing veil, radiant smile. She floated down the aisle, soaking in the admiration. For a moment, the guests were completely captivated by her. But I was watching Franklin. At some point, Madison's gaze slid over Elijah's shoulder and found Franklin's face in the front row. For one heartbeat, they shared that look, the look of people who believe they share a secret no one else knows. And then it was gone, swallowed by the performance. She joined Elijah at the altar. The officiant started talking about love, faithfulness, and lifelong commitment. The words felt like a cruel joke. They exchanged vows. They promised honesty and loyalty. They spoke about trust. Every syllable made my stomach churn. Franklin watched them with what anyone else would interpret as proud affection. I knew better. Finally, the officiant reached the line I'd been waiting for. "If anyone here knows of any reason these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." Silence fell over the garden. I stood up. When I rose, the hush over the guests snapped into a wave of whispers. 300 heads turned in my direction. Franklin's fingers tightened painfully around my arm. "Simone, sit down," he muttered through clenched teeth. "You're making a fool of yourself." I gently pulled my arm free and stepped into the center aisle. My knees felt weak, but my voice came out clear. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, addressing the officiant and the crowd. "But you asked if there is any reason this marriage shouldn't go forward. There is. And everyone here deserves to hear it." Madison's smile froze. Elijah's expression didn't change, but his eyes flicked briefly to mine in silent encouragement. Behind me, someone gasped loudly. Madison's father, the judge, shifted in his chair, his face darkening. "Mrs. Whitfield," he boomed. What is the meaning of this? The meaning, I said, turning slightly toward him, is that your daughter is entering this marriage under false pretenses. And I won't stand quietly while my son's life is built on lies. The judge's mouth opened, ready to object, but I didn't give him the chance. I reached into my clutch, pulled out the small remote, and pressed the button. The big screen behind the altar flickered to life. Instead of baby pictures, the first image that appeared was a clear photo of Franklin and Madison in my living room, locked in a passionate kiss. The same kiss Elijah and I had witnessed behind the hydrangeas. The garden erupted. Shouts. Cries. People stood up to get a better view. Madison made a strangled sound. Her mother clapped a hand over her mouth. That's not all, I said, raising my voice above the noise. This didn't happen once. It has been happening for months. The slides flipped. Image after image showed Franklin and Madison together, walking into the St. Regis, leaving with disheveled clothes, sitting close in dimly lit restaurants, pressed against his car in secluded parking lots. Dates and timestamps glowing in the corners. Franklin stumbled to his feet. These are fake, he shouted. You've lost your mind, Simone. You've been manipulated. This is some sick montage. Oh really? I said calmly. Then maybe you'd like to explain this. The slideshow shifted. Bank statements appeared, zoomed in on large cash withdrawals and suspicious transfers. Loan documents with my forged signature flashed on the screen. A jewelry receipt for an expensive necklace, followed by a photo of Madison wearing that necklace at her own bachelorette party. The noise started to die down. Shock does that to a crowd. It pulls everything tight and quiet. All you could hear was rustling fabric and the faint clicking of cameras as people recorded every second. My husband has been stealing from our retirement savings, I said. He drained money from the pension plan I built through my business to pay for hotel rooms and luxury gifts for his lover. And that lover, I pointed to Madison, was supposed to marry my son today. Madison shook her head frantically, words tangling in her throat. This is twisted. She's making this up. Elijah, you know I love. Do I? Elijah's voice cut through the air, cold and controlled. He hadn't moved from the altar, but now he stepped back from her, putting space between them. Because our definition of love seems to be different. We weren't done. And Madison, I continued, has her own financial hobbies. New slides appeared, internal law firm documents, fake invoices, a string of transfers into a shell corporation. Then screenshots of that shell company paying for luxury items and unexplained expenses. She has stolen over $200,000 from her own firm, I said. She used a company she set up under another name to funnel the money into her accounts. Some of that money bought gifts for my husband. While he stole from me to spoil her, she stole from her partners to spoil him. I saw Madison's colleagues in the audience. Their faces morphed from confusion to outrage in real time. And in case anyone still thinks this is just a messy love affair, I added, let me show you the part that shatters every illusion I had about my marriage. The slide changed once more. DNA results filled the screen. The conclusion line, probability of paternity 99.999%, was displayed in large, unmistakable letters, along with a photo of a 15-year-old girl with familiar eyes. This is Zoe, I said. My voice wavered, but I refused to break. She is my husband's daughter. He has hidden her existence from me and our son for her entire life. He has been living a double life for 15 years. A second family paid for with money he stole from ours. Then came silence. Not the stunned, buzzing quiet from before. This was total stillness. No one moved. No one spoke. For a few heartbeats, 300 people were forced to stare the truth in the face. The spell broke with a loud sob. Madison collapsed, crumpling to the ground in a mess of lace and makeup. The garden exploded into chaos again. People stood up, turned to each other, and whispered in harsh tones. Phones went up everywhere, capturing video, taking pictures of the screen, of me, of Elijah, of Madison on the ground. Franklin's face twisted into something ugly and unrecognizable. He looked at the crowd, at the screen, at me. And then he did exactly what I should have expected from him. He ran. He shoved his way past guests, nearly knocking over an elderly aunt. He clipped a waiter's tray, sending glasses crashing to the ground. He sprinted toward the parking lot like a man trying to outrun the consequences of his own life. Unfortunately for him, my sister was ready. Aisha stepped out from behind a tree near the path, still dressed as a caterer. She put one foot into his path. Franklin went flying, landing hard on the grass, his expensive suit smeared with dirt. "Going somewhere?" Aisha asked, strolling over to him like she had all the time in the world. Meanwhile, at the altar, Madison was back on her feet, swaying, mascara streaked down her face. She pointed a shaking finger at me. "You did this," she shrieked. "You set me up. You ruined my life." "You ruined your own life," Elijah said. He had moved to stand beside me now, one arm slightly in front of me, protective. His voice was steady and loud enough for everyone to hear. "You and my father did this. We just put a spotlight on it. Let go of me," Franklin yelled as Aisha grabbed his arm. "Relax, Frankie," she said evenly. "I'm not arresting you. That fun belongs to someone else today." Right on cue, two uniformed officers crossed the lawn. Some guests screamed when they saw them. Others fell completely silent. "Madison Ellington," one officer called out. Madison froze. "No," she whispered. "You're under arrest for suspected embezzlement and wire fraud," he said, stepping toward her with practiced calm. The second officer took her hands and cuffed them behind her back. The metallic click of the cuffs seemed to echo louder than the string quartet ever had. Madison's mother sobbed. Her father stared straight ahead, pale and stunned. Cameras flashed like crazy. The wedding photographers had shown up to capture a fairy tale. Instead, they caught an arrest and the implosion of two families. As they led Madison away, she twisted to look at Elijah. "Please, tell them it's a mistake," she begged. "You know me." He looked straight through her, his expression unreadable. "I thought I did," he said. "Turns out I was wrong about a lot of things." Slowly, the crowd began to break apart. Some people rushed to leave, desperate to escape before reporters arrived. Others lingered in clumps, whispering, replaying the scene in hushed voices. A few brave ones came up to squeeze my hand, eyes wide with sympathy and morbid fascination. My adrenaline drained all at once. My legs trembled. Elijah slid an arm around my shoulders. "It's over, Mom," he murmured. "It's finally over." I looked around at the scattered flower petals, the toppled chairs, the ruined arch. The day I'd wanted to be perfect was in pieces. And yet, standing there in the wreckage, I felt something I hadn't in months. Air in my lungs. If you're still listening, would you tap the like button and comment the number 1 below? It lets me know you stayed with me through this chaos and that you're here with me in this story. Comment a 1. And let me tell you what came after the wedding that never happened. The next 3 hours blurred together. Police questions, guests leaving in stunned silence, vendors packing up food that no one would eat. The string lights over the patio stayed dark. The dance floor remained untouched. Madison was driven away in the back of a patrol car, her white dress bunching awkwardly around her, veil crooked and limp. Franklin was questioned by officers but not arrested that day. Once they let him go, he walked to his car without looking back at me or Elijah. He got in and drove off, shrinking in the distance like a bad dream I couldn't quite wake from. The days that followed were brutal. The story spread fast. A wedding gone wrong always gets attention. A wedding blown apart by infidelity, fraud, and a secret child was irresistible. Headlines popped up on local news sites. Neighbors whispered. Clients quietly dropped my firm, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. The morning after the failed ceremony, I did what I'd planned. I went to my lawyer's office. I slid the signed divorce papers across the desk, along with the flash drive of evidence. With everything Aisha had gathered, Franklin didn't bother fighting. The divorce moved quickly and decisively. I kept the house and a large share of what was left, plus restitution for the stolen retirement funds. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like salvaging pieces from a house that had burned to the ground. Madison's firm initiated their own investigation. Faced with mountains of proof, she took a plea deal. She went to a low-security facility for 2 years and was ordered to repay every dollar she'd stolen. Her parents' standing in their social circles shattered overnight. Franklin's fall was quieter but just as thorough. He lost his job, his reputation, most of his friends. You can't live that kind of double life and walk away clean. Last I heard, he was in a small apartment on the other side of town, avoiding eye contact with everyone. The most complicated part, though, was Zoe. About 2 weeks after the non-wedding, I got a letter in the mail. The handwriting was neat, unfamiliar. It was from Nicole, Zoe's mother. She apologized for the pain her relationship with Franklin had caused and explained that Zoe had learned the truth from news coverage. The girl wanted to meet me and Elijah. I stared at that letter for days. On one hand, Zoe represented the deepest betrayal of my marriage. On the other, she was just a kid who'd been born into a mess she hadn't asked for. I showed the letter to Elijah. He read it, jaw tight but eyes thoughtful. "I want to meet her," he said. "She's my sister, Mom. None of this is her fault." So we agreed to meet in a cafe halfway between our towns. I was more nervous than I'd been on my own wedding day. I shredded a napkin into confetti just waiting for them to arrive. When they walked in, I knew immediately who Zoe was. She had Franklin's eyes, the same dark, sharp gaze that had once made me feel seen. She clutched a book to her chest like it was a shield. She looked scared. I realized in that moment that my anger had no place near her. The first meeting was awkward. Elijah did most of the talking, asking about school, friends, the book she was reading. He didn't ask about Franklin, and she didn't bring him up either. It was like everyone silently agreed that he didn't get to be at that table. I nodded, asked gentle questions, and tried to see the girl without the shadow of her father looming behind her. We left that day with no big declarations, just a quiet understanding that this wouldn't be our last meeting. And it wasn't. We met again and again. Coffee dates turned into lunches. Elijah and Zoe started texting, sending each other memes, movie recommendations, and random pictures. I watched them fit together in small ways, a shared sense of humor, similar stubborn streaks, the way they both scrunched their noses when concentrating. Over time, Zoe stopped being a symbol of betrayal and became just Zoe. Smart. Funny. A kid trying to figure out who she was in the middle of a wrecked map. The year after the ruined wedding wasn't easy. The legal stuff wrapped up. The headlines moved on. I sold the big house with its echoing memories and bought a smaller place that I could actually breathe in. I rebuilt my business slowly, one returning client at a time. Elijah went to therapy. He processed the shock, the anger, the humiliation. It wasn't a quick fix, but it helped him untangle what had happened from who he was. He left his corporate job and went back to school for landscape architecture, a field that made his eyes light up in a way I hadn't seen in years. He started designing outdoor spaces, building order and beauty from soil and stone, just like he'd been doing with his life. He eventually started dating again. The woman he ended up with wasn't flashy or from a powerful family. She was a librarian who adored old books and looked at Elijah like he was the best story she'd ever read. Watching him with her hurt and healed me at the same time. Zoe became part of our lives in a quiet, steady way. She came over every other Sunday for dinner. She and Elijah bickered playfully, swapped music, and joked like siblings who had grown up together instead of just met. I found myself fussing over her, sending her home with leftovers, reminding her about deadlines, asking about exams. One night, when she laughed at one of my corny jokes, something in my chest loosened. She was part of our family. Not the one I thought I had, but the one I was learning to accept. About a year after the wedding that wasn't. My doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I opened it, Franklin was standing there. He looked smaller somehow, like the air had leaked out of him. Tired. Grayer. The smug confidence that used to surround him like cologne was gone. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. Every instinct screamed no. But another part of me, the part that didn't want this unfinished thing hanging over my head forever, stepped aside and let him in. We sat in my living room, the new one without the ghosts of our old holidays. He told me he was in therapy. He said he was trying to figure out why he had done what he'd done, why he'd sabotaged the very life he claimed to value. He apologized for the lies, the affair, the stolen money, the other child he kept hidden from me. I listened. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't say the things that would have made it easier for him. When he finished, I took a deep breath. "I forgive you," I said. He looked shocked. "You do?" "Yes," I said. "But not for you. For me. Anger's heavy. Franklin. I've carried enough. I'm putting it down." I held his gaze. "But don't mistake forgiveness for trust. I will never trust you again. We're done. There is no version of the future where you and I are a couple. We're just two people who used to be married, tied together only by our son." He nodded slowly, tears gathering in his eyes. "I understand," he whispered. He left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood there for a long time, staring at that closed door and feeling lighter. That night, getting ready for bed, I thought of the woman I had been a year earlier. The one crouching in the dirt behind hydrangeas, watching her life fall apart through a window. She'd felt helpless, drowning in betrayal. If I could have stepped back in time and spoken to her, I would have told her this: "You are going to survive this. The life you thought you had will shatter, but the pieces will become something else. Smaller. Simpler. More honest." The family I believed in never truly existed. It was held together by lies I didn't know about and truths I didn't want to see. But what Elijah, Zoe, and I were building now was real. It was messy and imperfect, but it was built on the truth, not on pretending. We lost so much that day in the garden. But in the wreckage, we found something we hadn't had in a long time: freedom. Thank you for listening to my story. If anything I've shared has touched something in your own life, or if you've lived through your own kind of betrayal, feel free to share in the comments. Your story matters. And if you'd like to hear more, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time.